Meeting is now reopened. My 5 minutes wasn't quite long enough. And I want to thank Todd for all his input tonight. Slapping me around a little bit when I needed it. Anyhow, back to business as usual. At this point, we normally make a motion. And let me tell you why we do that. You know, Robert's Rules of Order, before you open discussion, you have to have something to discuss. You have to have a motion in front of you with a second. Then you know where you're headed. The discussion is about were we for or against that motion. So that's what we'll be doing. The other thing is, I'm going to entertain a motion in a minute for approval. And you're going to think, what am I jumping the gun? What's this guy doing? He's new to the job, does he understand? And again, that Robert's Rules of Order, they recommend that because if you make a motion, a negative motion, not to approve, and then people start voting, and they vote no, they think, is it no mean a yes, or is it, you get double negatives and everybody gets confused. So, when I make a motion, don't anybody throw any spitball at me. I'm going to make a positive motion, and if it dies, it dies. And for this particular case, Todd is schooling me that as we make a motion, we should have a basis for that motion. It's a positive motion. And would you elaborate a little bit on that, Todd?
Sure thing. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, you as members of the Planning and Zoning Board, you've heard public comment, you've heard the applicant's presentation. I have stressed to you over and over that your decision tonight is actually not supposed to be made on the applicant's presentation. They may be the greatest family business around, they may have done a lot of civic things, they may have been somebody that has operated successfully within the county for a while, but we need to have you really set all that aside. Tonight, I need to have you focus on two things, and that's whether or not the land in question, these two lots, whether they are suitable for the commercial general uses and suitable for the surrounding area. You're going to be asked to make decisions, motions on two particular items. You're going to be making a decision first on the land use change. So let me help sort of cut through some of those things, and I realize you know this helps as well for the public. What is the town of Malabar's comp plan? The comp plan is a guide. It's how you want the community to look in the future. It's been referenced by various applicants or various members of the public tonight. It is what you want to see happen in the future for your community. Your zoning ordinance and zoning map, they represent specific districts that are to be in line with what the stated goal was of your forecast plan. The one is the law of what you can do, that's your zoning ordinance, that's the law. We can only do this. The comp plan is what we hope things will do. So we review both of those whenever we have a request. Now the applicant, they're to perform their homework. They've looked, I'm assuming, at the district, and I'm assuming that they understand the uses that are allowed in the district, and whether or not their use is a use that's allowed in the district. Staff's job is to look at the request of commercial general as well as the zoning change, and in looking at that, we have to consider whether that is an okay for all the uses that are in there for the site, and not on their request at all. So I want to help clarify those differences because it's a big consideration for you. So when we look at the commercial general uses in relationship to the neighborhood, that's where our recommendation is based upon that aspect. The applicant's particular site, they have to come back at a site plan process as anybody would, and they have to make their case and be able to go through that particular process. For your action tonight, you will have a land use decision. We use what we call the 3 C's. We look at consistency. Is it consistent with the comp plan and what's going on for that area? We look at the capability. Is the site capable of handling the uses that are described in that area. So you're trying to look at the uses, so consistency, the capability. And as you begin to go through these, in fact, I think your packet, Debbie, I think, was that provided in there?
The 3 Cs, yes.
Yeah. So you have all these for your consideration to be able to look at. You are using those when going through your land use change. Your basis for deciding on the land use change should be based on someone making a motion and making a statement that they are asking for action to be taken on the land use change, referencing the fact that you believe it's compatible, that it's capable, that it's consistent. So as you go through those Cs, you want to try and reference those aspects as it relates to this. Because otherwise, if you just say, I move in favor of the request, well, that is not enough of a basis. Second to that, you're going to have changes for amending your actual code. That'll be the second motion. Your land use, your land development code per section 1-12.5. And I want to read this to you so it's clear as it discusses this. Planning and Zoning Board, regardless of the source of the proposed zoning change petition, will hold a public hearing with due public notice. That's what happened tonight. Town Planning and Zoning Board will submit a written report and recommendation concerning the change to the Town Council, which that will be a meeting held on Monday, for their official action. So you're only making a recommendation. Whatever happens tonight is not the official decision, it's only a recommendation. If the Planning Board denies the requested zoning change or amendment, this action shall be deemed final unless action is appealed to the Town Council pursuant to section 1-12.3C. In its deliberations, the Planning and Zoning Board shall consider the following criteria. There are 10 items. Number 1, consistent with the plan. You're to look at whether the proposal is consistent with the comp plan, including the adopted infrastructure, minimum levels of service standards, and the concurrency management program. Tonight, there were things mentioned about traffic. And if you look at the county's level of service plan that's also been adopted by the town, you'll see what the level of service is for Malabar Road. Although we all may agree that there have been problems at times with the roadway, depending upon which street you're trying to exit out onto. You will note, though, that the actual level of service for the road at this point is not very high. If it were high, then we would obviously be hearing more from the county, and they would be looking at pushing forward at a faster pace, widening of Malabar Road, as well as any other intersection improvements. It's frustrating because we hate that it has to wait until a point where the level of service reaches a certain point. However, that is how the funding mechanism works with the county, as well as the funds that they receive from the state. But you're to consider all of the uses that could go in and not the proposed use. You're thinking about various uses, what kind of an impact on the level of service would that make? And I want to make note as well that obviously, staff are here as well, so if Morris, if you all have any comments, to be able to come up and provide those. Second item, 10 items. I want to go through this quickly. Second, conformance with ordinances. Whether the proposal is in conformance with all applicable requirements of the Town of Malabar Code of Ordinances. Third, changed conditions. Whether and the extent to which land and development conditions have changed since the effective date of the existing regulations in the amendment. Next, adequate public facilities. Whether the extent of proposal would result in demands on public facilities and services exceeding the capacity of such facilities and existing or programmed, including transportation, water and wastewater, solid waste disposal, drainage, rec, education, emergency services, and whatnot. Land use compatibility, whether the extent of proposal would result in any incompatible land uses, considering the type and location. Next is the natural environment, whether and the extent to which the proposal would result in adverse impacts on the natural environment, including consideration of wetlands protection, preservation of groundwater aquifer, wildlife habitats, vegetative commodities, and wellhead protection. Should be noted here that the applicant has provided an environmental study for both the 2 eastern lots, and then recently they also provided one for the western lot, which we're only concerned about the western lot and the middle lot. In their actual environmental study, it does show there are extensive wetlands, especially on the middle piece. That middle piece of property has quite a bit, so any development for that area would have to go through wetland mitigation. They would have to consider the impacts that any of the development would have on wetlands, and going through that process in the mitigation aspect would have to mitigate for those per, obviously, the state requirements, and there's a mitigation factor that has a amount of additional wetland mitigation that they have to provide elsewhere. There are different banks around that they're able to pay into those banks, because obviously if you affect the wetland, it's not like you're trying to relocate a wetland on your own property, but you would have to go through that mitigation process. So they are not able to, no matter who's developing, they're not able to go onto a site and just destroy a wetland without having to mitigate for that. Same, we're often looking at the natural features of the site, you're looking at trees, historic trees that may be in place. You're trying to make sure that you're being environmentally sensitive to whatever happens on a site, and not allowing somebody just to come in and to remove all the trees, and remove everything there, and to leave a site leaving in a state that is not appropriate. So that's always a consideration for you. 7 are the economic effects. You're looking at the effect of how it would adversely affect property values in the area or the general welfare. So you have 2 items under that. 8 is the orderly development, whether the proposal would result in an orderly and compatible land use pattern. Any negative effects on the pattern would be identified. 9 are the public interests, whether the proposal would be in conflict with the public interest, and whether it's in harmony with the purpose and intent of this ordinance and its enabling legislation. So included in that, obviously, the public interest. You've heard from public comment. It does give you the ability to consider, obviously, what is being discussed here. We're always, though, mindful of the fact that sometimes a crowd that may be present may not be the entire voice, but you know, based upon who you see, what you've heard, whether or not you believe you're hearing from enough of a majority to make sure that you are hearing an appropriate voice as in any decision. The last thing would be what we call other matters, and that is other matters which the Planning and Zoning Board may deem appropriate. Make sure, though, that as you move forward in this, take your time, make your consideration, your deliberations appropriate, and be mindful of the fact that when it's time to make a motion, I will help you by this to say, if you're making a motion for the land use change, you would make a recommendation or a denial based upon the fact that you believe it is consistent with the 3 Cs as stated in the packet for your land use change, as well as being consistent with the provisions of the Town of Malabar's code. When it comes to the zoning, someone would make a motion reflecting the fact that you believe it is or is not in line with section 1-12.5, which are your procedures for adopting, supplementing, or amending the land development code. With that, your staff stand ready to answer any questions that you may have of us and to help you as you work on your deliberations for this matter.
Okay, Todd, thank you. I pushed back on one item. Earlier this week, I was told that if we make a motion to approve the applicant's ordinance, that it would sweep both of these in, the comp plan change and the rezoning into one action.
So what I would, again, unless you've heard something different, normally the way we're going to proceed with these is it is 2 separate legal actions.
You want to keep it separate, all right. I said just push back, but you push back me up.
Yeah.
You win.
It's they're not
Okay.
synonymous, so normally you're going to take action on one. If the first one fails, then obviously you come to the second one, but you're dealing with 2 separate actions.
You do it for a living, this is a hobby for me, okay. Which I may change it. All right, that being said, thank you. I will entertain a motion to accept the applicant's rezoning. Excuse me, let's do the land
Land use
comp
first.
change plan, change, land rezoning, land use change to the map. Because it is consistent with the 3 Cs. That's the way I'm going to state the motion. And Debbie, when you get comfortable, play that back.
Okay, to recommend council approve the land use change because it is consistent with the 3 Cs, and I'll elaborate.
Yeah, not council, but
Well, your motion is to recommend
to
to
council.
council.
Okay, I'm sorry, you're right. Need a beer? Okay. Do I hear this? Do I have it?
Yeah, we need
I need a motion.
And again, if you don't have a second, that motion would then fail.
Does anybody want to, I'll entertain that motion. Anybody gonna come forward with? Okay. I won't worry about a second then. All right. I will entertain a motion, not the negative of the motion, we couldn't get anybody to make it.
So that would be to recommend council deny the land use change because it is inconsistent with the three Cs.
Yes, thank you.
I make a motion to recommend denial to the town council for the land use change.
Do we have a second?
I will second that motion.
All right. Now, we have a motion on the floor, and I've learned a lot tonight. Todd's taught me more in an hour than I learned in the last year or two. And the alternates cannot participate in the discussion, only the voting members. Okay, that's, I know we've been doing it for long, whatever, that's the rules, so discussion is open.
Is there a roll call vote?
Well,
Well, we're not voting until discussion's done.
Okay, my main reason for denial is I'd like to read the preamble. The people of the town of Malabar desire to maintain a rural residential quality of life in their town, and they are concerned about the possibility of uncontrolled growth in the future affecting that type of lifestyle. The people of the town of Malabar are concerned that the power to govern their town remains vested in the duly elected town council. Therefore, they have ratified by referendum this charter and enacted it into law. They wish to maintain the rural residential character of their community. Furthermore, having complete faith in representative government, with the ultimate power to govern remaining with themselves, they desire to codify the recent history of Malabar, which has been the practice of vesting the decision-making power of the town in a 5-member town council. It's been clear from the get-go that we hope to stay and remain a rural residential quality of life. The businesses that anyone seeks are no more than 4 or 5 miles away. Most people here have made comments, and those that are not here have commented to me. They moved here for the rural residential lifestyle. I personally didn't make the choice. I married into this area, but for me, you know, seeing the wildlife come through my yard, I have deer, I have fox, I have sandhill cranes. That is not something I would find in Palm Bay or Melbourne. We now have the trailhead, which is only here as a trailhead town because of the rural nature of our town and because of the trails. I'd hate to see all that go by the wayside. We don't speculate on our zoning, on land use, so that is out of the situation for whatever business might come. We spent a lot of time, I was on the board when Bob Lower was here, and I guess I'm the oldest one on the board now that's been here long enough. We spent years on what we wanted to see our future land use to be. And it wasn't big business, it's small personal business where somebody could live in the house and have a small business that's for the local use, for local residents here. So I don't find that this is compatible with our preamble or with what our future is, our vision for this town, or what the residents here want to see.
Those are good. Any more discussion?
Yes, I'd like to make a couple of comments. I'm typically pro-business for our town. I think the business community has been good neighbors, good citizens. The businesses that we have a sterling reputation of having a nice place, being wonderful town members. They contribute a tremendous amount of revenue to our town, and I generally support businesses in our community. The difference between a homeowner paying taxes towards the upkeep of the roads and the drainage and all the things that have to happen in a business take money, and I am certainly aware that businesses contribute a huge amount tax revenue over what the residential community does. So I'm generally pro-business. However, I have been on the planning and zoning board for a number of years, and we've worked for a long time on a new comprehensive zoning plan and land use development plan. We spent a tremendous amount of time, a lot of energy. Every consideration was made to guide the town of Malabar forward, being considerate of the fact that business community is necessary for the health of our community. I feel this personal applicant is far outside of our land use plan and our zoning plan that we spent months and months on. So for that reason, I think they could probably be good neighbors and good citizens, but this is far outside of what we as a board spent many months. After we got done with it, for many months, it went to the town council. They spent a large amount of time and effort going over it. And one of the comments that I heard and struck a bell with me is, you worked hard on the plan, you should stick with the plan. I am pretty much in agreement with that. I have said I'm pro-business. I think that business has a wonderful place in our community and they should be embraced and invited. But this is too much to be consistent with our plan, planning comprehensive land use and zone plan that both the P&Z and the town council have spent a lot of time with to agree for a direction forward for our town that's healthy business-wise and income-wise and to protect the rural atmosphere. So that is my
Mr. Chair.
Any more discussion?
I'll make one quick comment. I think somebody in the public pointed this out. I support the things that George and Liz both said here. I was an alternate on the P&Z when we were going through the land use map and in excruciating detail. And I remember how much pain we went through to try to get to residential, limited, commercial, and identifying that as the primary area that we would move toward on Malabar Road. If you look at our land use by district chart for commercial general, there is an asterisk, a conditional asterisk, and somebody pointed this out earlier, that these uses are permitted only on sites abutting Babcock Street, US 1, and West Railroad Avenue. That's not a typo. That was forethought that we went through to try to make sure that this kind of thing was addressed. And for that reason, I support this as well.
Very good. Mary?
Mr. Chair, just a point of order on this. You have a nuance in your ordinance that allows, under section 2-211.8, you actually do allow your alternates to speak. Obviously, when it comes time for voting, you have your 5 members that are voting. So, Mr. White and Mr. Rice. So just so they can add comments to your discussion. So
I thought
we were, but you have a nuance in your ordinance, and I want to be accurate. So you have that aspect. So
okay, our ordinance overrides them?
yes.
Okay.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I was kind of conflicted with this ever since this was brought to us. Because I want to see the growth in the town, but I've also lived here for a long time, and I've seen the drainage issues that we have. Could a business like that help offset some of those costs and put money back in to help that? Possibly. But I also have family members that work for Harris and use Marie Street and to get to work. I live off of Quarry Road. We use Weber, Quarry, Babcock. The traffic is horrendous. Marie Street is kind of our Harris folks' only outlet to get to work on time. So that being said, I can't support it.
Okay, now that we flip back Alan, do you have any comments? Discussion?
I guess the comment that I have is, I guess a representative form of government, that when the people come out and speak and you hear what people have to say and their concerns, that you do need to listen, and there's very good points made, and so I think it does need to be CG, not granted.
Doug?
No comment.
Okay. All right, if discussion is over, I'll ask the dean in a minute to do a roll call vote, but before that, now understand, if you vote yes to this motion, you're voting no, okay?
Right.
Voting to deny?
You're voting to deny. I'll make that clear, okay, the dean would do a roll call vote.
Mr. Chair, just to help your motion, a very good point was brought up by Ms. Ritter, since she is the author of the motion. And I'd almost ask if you would consider, you made your motion, but you specifically stated that you tied that into the preamble. And I'd ask that perhaps you consider seeing if she would add that to her motion. Then obviously the seconder would need to accept that as well, because I feel as though it was a specific, very specific point of her motion as to her reason for her motion. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I want to be
My
clear.
recommendation to denial was based considerably on our preamble.
Well, you can consider the three Cs, but to add that into the motion, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear.
So considerably attached to the preamble, which I've given to Denise for attachment. And Harry would have to say.
I would second that. Recommend to deny.
Okay, Deneen, do a roll call, please.
George Foster,
I vote to deny, so aye.
Yes. Okay.
Doug Dyer,
Aye.
Liz Ritter,
Aye.
Mary,
Aye.
Wayne,
Aye.
motion carried 5-0 to deny.
Okay, thank you. I will now entertain a motion for the rezoning change to CG. To approve that, based on the three Cs. And that's to recommend the council to approve, since we can't do it ourselves.
And again, this action should be based upon that section 1-12. Point 5, and those 10 conditions that are in place that you believe it is or is not consistent with 1-12.5, those 10 items that I read.
Okay.
Point of order.
I believe that was what was in their packet was the same point of order.
I'm in one of those point of order, I'll be honest. Okay, well, I entertain, does anybody want to make a motion, then we can clean up the wording after they make the initiative?
Make a motion to recommend denial of town council for rezoning and the three Cs and with our preamble.
Well, before you do that, nobody wants to make a motion in the affirmative?
No.
Okay, then you go ahead, please. So you made a motion to deny, okay?
Planner had suggested referencing section 1-12.5, the 10 points.
Correct.
You want to include that in your motion?
Yes.
And do we have a second?
I will second that.
All right. Okay, and again, if you vote yes, you're voting to deny. And Deneen?
Any discussion?
Well, I think we've already discussed it.
She's correct. You should ask for any discussion following the motion and then call for your vote.
Well, okay, it's a different motion, I guess, yeah, that's true. But it was all one, it was all swept in there. But, okay, any further discussion on this second motion? Or any discussion at all? All right, we good. Deneen, we do a roll call vote, please?
George Foster,
Yes, to deny.
Doug Dial,
Aye.
Liz Ritter,
Aye.
Mary,
I,
Wayne Bear.
Aye.
Motion carried 5-0 to deny the.
Okay. The next regular planning and zoning board meeting is January 9th. Hope to see some of you people there, but I suspect it'll be a much smaller crowd.
You're always welcome to public council.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will second that.
No, I'm entertaining, I can't make a
I'll
motion.
make a motion.
And we have a second?
I will second that.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried.